How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. This is going to be a real-life tactic recreation in FIFA 21. So appreciate it before we get started. If you guys can like, comment, subscribe, let me know what else you want to see. We're going to jump into it and start off with how Pep Guardiola's Barcelona played in real life. And if you're not as interested in the concepts, the theory, kind of the real-life basis of this, I'm going to put a timestamp on the video right now so you can jump straight ahead to the tactics if you just want to see what I'm doing in-game. So when Pep took over Barcelona, he wanted to focus more on taking them back to the core of what Johan Cruyff had implemented when he was a player there, which was short passing, teamwork, interchangeability, and positional play. So most of the time, with their standard setup, Messi was actually their right winger, with Eto'o as more of a standard striker running in behind, Messi cutting inside, and Dani Alves overlapping on the right. However, for a big game against Real Madrid, he decided to implement Messi as a false nine to change up the game and to confuse the center backs. So this is really what he became most known for at Barcelona, implementing Messi as the false nine. However, this really wasn't their main setup. This is really just something they did for bigger games, and then towards the end of his tenure became more of a staple of how they played. So if you ask any really casual football observer what the key aspect to this Barcelona side was, most people would probably say tiki-taka. Really, though, this is a bit of a misnomer. Barcelona were rarely keeping possession for the sake of it. It was often to move the ball, break down sides, and wait for gaps to open, and also as a defensive mechanism to prevent getting countered by playing risky passes with so many players far up the field. So really, this isn't something that we should be looking to replicate in the game, just mindlessly passing it around, moving it around the back, 1-2 back and forth with no real movement. You have to be moving, but you're just a little more cautious with the risks that you're taking. So when you look at how Barcelona actually set up in game, they were really pushing players forward, had overlapping runs, combinations between different players, rather than just having a safe formation with players staying back and just retaining the ball for no real purpose. And something I mentioned that you may be a little less familiar with is the concept of positional play. Here we have a standard grid outline of the standard zones that most coaches, most managers, most academies would instruct on, and you can see that's fairly standard, equal-sized grids, 18 of them going across. Not much to say. You may recognize these zones from my crossing video, talking about crossing from zones 13 and 15, but this is how a standard manager would see the game. But what we're seeing now is more and more managers converting to the system Pep is using with positional play, which uses some slightly different grid zones, and the key tenet of those being that you don't have multiple players in the same zone in order to keep proper spacing. So we see with this new grid layout over the formation that where these players are positioned is very intentional, so that we don't have players in the same zones or making runs into the same zones. These players can move vertically or horizontally, diagonally, and if one player is moving into a zone, that means another player in that zone needs to be moving out of it. So this is where you get those interchange play, those quick 1-2s, players combining, then moving away, which really makes it difficult for the defense because they want to keep proper spacing and not bunch up. So they're hesitant to track multiple runners moving into the same zone, and then someone moves away unmarked. So now as we start to look at these tactics in a FIFA sense, you may be thinking that the formation on your screen now is more of a 4-3-2-1, and that is actually what we're going to be using in game. The reason for that is that unfortunately with FIFA it's not quite nuanced enough with the tactical movement in this game to know where players need to be, at least in a sense of how Pep Guardiola wants to play. So for example, the wingers may stay very wide and not cut inside even if you tell them to. The overlapping fullbacks will end up just standing next to them because there's no space to run into. It just kind of makes for a bit of a mess. So what we are doing instead is a 4-3-2-1, which keeps the wingers a little more narrow, but also gives that space for the wingbacks to overlap into, and also, as you can see, still keeps good enough spacing for positional play. It's not perfect, but it's really the best that we can do in FIFA at this time. So now let's take a look at our defensive tactics in game. So of course we are going with press after possession loss. A key part of how Pep was playing was winning the ball back as quickly as possible, so we definitely want to press hard. We're on 10 depth, so we have that defensive line up as high as possible, always looking to condense the space and close people down as quickly as possible so we can get back on the ball. We're going with 4 width so that the pressing is fairly condensed, forcing players into tight corners, hopefully getting our pressing close together so we can double team if necessary, but really just not spreading out too wide to leave those channels for through balls through the half spaces. And moving into our attacking tactics, definitely want to have our offensive style set to possession. This means that our runners are coming short, checking to the ball to play those interchange passes, but it doesn't mean that everyone's just clumping in, running straight towards the ball. You'll definitely notice that there's plenty of runs in behind, especially with the player instructions that we're using. So definitely be on the lookout for those runs happening, but you'll also have plenty of passing options short. For width, we're going with 4. Pep's Barca actually did play quite wide. Unfortunately, in FIFA, if the width is too high, you often have players just kind of standing out on the touchline, not really getting involved, so we're going with 4, just to keep those short passing lanes open for those interchange play opportunities. Players in box, we're going with 6. This just encourages more runners to make runs into the box, hopefully a little more free-flowing, getting players involved. And for the set pieces, really do what you feel best here. I think this is the most accurate with corners on 3, having a few taller players up in the box to win those headers, and then free kicks on 1 because Barcelona usually took those short, and I think in FIFA, free kicks whipped into the box aren't that effective anyway, so you're probably better off just using 1 anyway. And moving into player instructions, we'll start at the back with the goalkeeper. Of course, we want him on sweeper keeper. This is really important for Pep with that high line, high press, that you have a keeper who's ready to come off his line and clear any through balls in behind. So you need to be aggressive with this. I think it works well in FIFA anyway. As for the crosses, I leave it on balanced because I don't think you really need to put it on comes for crosses or cautious. But if you feel like it's a struggle, something you need to change, feel free to do so. I think it just makes sense depending on the keeper that you're using. And over to our right back, this is the Dani Alves role, so you definitely want someone on join the attack and overlap, making those wide right runs to overlap the right forward who is staying a little more narrow. I do use conservative interceptions. This just helps when you're recovering for that player to get back into position and not be running all over the place. It's more of a thing that helps for FIFA for making the tactic successful. Not necessarily the most realistic to real life, but I think it's not the most unrealistic, and if it helps you, play a little bit better in FIFA, it's probably worth doing. And our left back is the Eric Abidal role. Definitely a bit more defensive, a little more stable, not quite as bombing forward as the Dani Alves role, but definitely someone who is still providing width, so that's why we're using balanced and overlap, as well as the conservative interceptions. Don't be surprised with the balanced attacking runs that player still will make those overlapping runs at times, probably a bit more than Eric Abidal would, but I wouldn't use stay back unless you're really trying to hold a lead just because it's a little too defensive. You need someone to provide that width on the left, so when the left forward cuts inside, someone is out wide to help stretch play. For our center backs, I'm just using the default instructions. You could use the join attack instruction on one player to kind of replicate how PK plays, but I don't think this really does that much in FIFA, so I would just leave them as default. So moving to our central center midfielder, we're treating this as our CDM, our defensive midfielder, our Busquets role, also played by Yaya Toure. So definitely want to stay back and cover center. Also stay on the edge of box for cross just to make sure that player really isn't making any forward runs. This is your pivot, someone who's going to hold their position in front of the back four and really just help make sure that you're not caught out on the counter, and you also have a passing option if you need to play backwards. Now onto our right center mid. Please be aware that this and the left center mid are different. So if you want to flip the formation, feel free to do so, but I would make sure that you have two distinct roles here just because you want some balance to the team. So starting with balanced attacking runs, this means that sometimes if there is space ahead that they will make that run, but you don't want them bombing forward, you want a little more of a stable player. Likewise, staying on the edge of box for a cross, just make sure that when the ball's out wide that we have a short passing option to keep play moving rather than being forced to whip it into the box. Free roam is really important here. This just means that they're going to float around, pick up those pockets of space, and really just try to get involved wherever the play is. And then we are also leaving them on cover wing. This is just to help when defending the counter. We have that right back bombing forward, going wide, so they'll just tuck in a bit on that right half space, right wing, until the right back can recover, just to make sure we're not exposed down the wings. And going from our more stable central midfielder role, the Xavi role, now we're moving to the Iniesta role on the left. Again, you can flip these if you need to, but this is going to be your more attacking player. So really just the same instructions as the right center mid, except we're adding get forward for the attacking support runs. So what this really means is that because you have a striker who is on false 9 dropping deep, this means that the left center mid, when that happens, can make those runs in behind. Doesn't mean he's always going to be just sprinting straight forward because we're on the possession tactic, but it does mean that when that space is there, he can run into it, similar to the way that Iniesta did. Sometimes Iniesta did make those runs wide rather than straight forward, but this does help him get a little more involved in an attacking sense. And onto our front line, we start with the right forward and left forward. We're going to be using the same instructions for both here, and all we're putting on these guys is get in behind. With Pep's actual real-life Barcelona team, we were using more of a 4-3-3, wingers cutting inside from wide. Here we're a little different with the right forward, left forward a little more narrow. Rather than cutting inside, they're starting a little more central and then making those runs straight in behind. But it is the best way to get them more involved. With the 4-3-3 wide in this, the wingers are just too wide. They're really not involved. They just kind of stand there. So by using left forward, right forward, they can drop deep, help build play, and then make those runs in behind for the through balls as the false 9 drops back. And finally, we have our striker, our false 9. So again, that is our only instruction on this player. You could add drift wide if you want to try to interchange a little bit more. I like just leaving it on balance so they can kind of go where they want to. So again, we have that false 9 who's going to drop deep. He's going to interplay with the center mids, the CDM, the wide forwards, the wing backs. So he's really involved in everything. And after he plays those balls, the right forward and left forward can move into that space. He can move into their areas, or he can just turn and run straight in behind. He can also hang on the edge of the box to help recycle play. So this is really your most involved attacking player. You need someone who's really good all around, passing, shooting, dribbling, everything. Doesn't have to be the fastest, but it does help because they can turn and run in behind, especially on the counter. If you trigger those manual runs, they will be there to make them if you want them to. And just before we move into some gameplay clip examples, I just wanted to show you guys the squad that I was using this past weekend. This is for the Weekend League Plus challenge with the extra Spain player requirement, so figured it was a good time to kind of break out a bit of a Barcelona theme. Got Xavi and Iniesta and Busquets. They weren't necessarily the best players at this stage of the game, but they really fit the roles well and helped to really show what this formation should be doing. And this squad did get to 14-3 at one point this weekend, so definitely shows that the tactic is viable. You can have success with this. I think it's probably the best balance of being accurate to the real-life tactic while still being effective in-game. Did suffer a few losses after that as the meta kind of cut up with players like Xavi and Busquets not being quite good enough at this stage of the game, but I think that for the purposes of having fun and hopefully moving into next season, you guys can have some fun with it. I have been showing examples using Ultimate Team, but I definitely think you guys could replicate this in career mode as well, so let me know how you find it in the comments below. So jumping straight into our first clip, we see we have a free kick, playing it short, and we have those passing options. We see the run coming wide and that overlap from the fullback, a give and go, down the line, and an easy tap in. And as we watch this back in slow motion, I just want to point out, as soon as the ball goes to that wide forward, you see that balanced fullback still making that run because there's that space there, a little give and go, chipped through ball, and then you have the easy cutback, a very Barcelona goal, something you would see all the time from them in real life. Straight into our next clip, just watch the give and go, the interchange here. Players are just moving everywhere, and we're going to watch this back again in slow motion. The goal itself was a bit of individual play from R9, which made it easier, but the passing movement is really what we're looking for. So looking back at this, you watch the give and go, he's making that run. One more pass inside opens up the passing lane for that really good through ball. Although he doesn't have the pace to get down the byline, he can still cut back inside, and watch how players interchange. One cuts back, another moves forward, one goes wide, another inside, cuts back to give the space, doesn't need it because the shooting lane is there, but we always have those options. And here we have an example of how this tactic can work on the counter. It's not just about a slow, methodical possession build. So you see we go wide, we cut it back inside, really key to move inside to out and back and forth, and you see it just opens up that lane because it's just dragging people everywhere. So let's again watch this one more time. Give and go. Always moving into space, never just standing still. Play it wide, it drags the left back wide. which opens up the lane to the pass in the middle. He brings the center back out so we can give and go right around him, and it's an easy opportunity. So just by that ball movement, not anything impressive with dribbling or skills, we're just opening up lots of easy passing lanes and good chances. Our next clip shows breaking through some higher pressure, some quick one-touch passing, again moving wide to go inside, get down the line, and then back across. So again, that theme of going inside, outside, inside, just moving the defense back and forth, especially against more narrow formations. It's really dragging players all over the place, can be really effective on the counter going into space, or with that interplay with shorter passing if you're trying to break down a more compact defense. In our next clip, we actually start out of possession, showing that ball recovery, having those quick center backs to win the ball back, and then we're just being patient. As the team is recovering, we don't just want to play out immediately with that possession tactic. We won't really have runners in the right place. So we play through the press, we're patient, we go wide. Again, similar to that last clip, we go inside, and then we cut it back. We're just being patient so we can interplay with our different options, and eventually it leads to a good shooting opportunity. So again, watching this back a little slower, you'll see we track that run, players in a good position to recover, and just playing it back to be patient. And here we're just inviting the press a bit so that we can play through it. So if we immediately went and turned around, we could play it to a center back and he could go upfield, but then see there's not really much to do. So we're just playing a bit just to get them to move some players out of position. So you see he drags that one striker down a bit, the other striker up, and now we can play straight through, break the lines, and go right into midfield. And now we can turn and go. So we already have those options open upfield. We can play down the line, and we're in behind. So it's just really something you need to be patient with. Don't just try to win the ball back and hoof it back upfield, play a hard through ball. You got to be patient, and then you can lead to this numerical advantage. 5 versus 4, runners everywhere. He can't mark everyone, and it's an easy shot from the top of the box. And on to our last clip. We see breaking the press again, using those midfield options, a lot of quick one-touch passing. No one's really dribbling more than 1 or 2 touches, just really quick, and suddenly that lane opens up. So we're just being patient, continuously moving the ball and waiting for a run to not be tracked. And if we watch right here, you see that player he's controlling moves up. So I know he has to move the center back up to compensate the lane, and it gives too big of a gap when I play inside. So once he starts moving multiple players in one direction, I go the opposite direction, he overcompensates, and then the lane is wide open for an easy finish. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching. Again, let me know if there's anything else you want to see. Planning to do a few more kind of content-focused videos before FIFA 22, some concepts for promotions, what we could see for player upgrades in FIFA Ultimate Team, and then also some more tactics. So stay tuned, planning to do another video like this one for Pep's tactics with Bayern Munich as well as with Manchester City. So I think that's going to be a really great video. And again, let me know how you guys get on if you try these tactics out. Let me know how you do with those. So again, thanks so much for watching. Peace.